So based on what you know at this stage, you should review your mission statement and your initial strategy and determine what has to be refined or adjusted. Discuss your findings with senior administrators and other concerned parties, including IT, legal, and key department heads, to get their support and input. They may be unaware of some of your key findings, and this could change their perspective. Remember, don't be afraid to change course. Do you change your focus onto another department? Is your initial scope too big or too small? It is better to make the change now before jumping into the process and changing later on. Determine the initial tools you plan on using within your program. Should you consider commercial off-the-shelf software or open source software that is free to obtain but may require additional support to set up and deploy? Open source software has many benefits, including having the source code to allow organizations to modify or tailor the software to meet specific needs. But it also means you don't have an 800 number to contact the vendor for help when you want it. Talk to your peers and to your IT organization for their input on specific applications. You can also develop your own, but obviously this will require even greater resources to develop and support. The bottom line is, you must know your own support capabilities. Don't be short-sighted and take on an application or process you cannot support. You also need to determine your IT infrastructure, including the storage environment. Will it be dedicated to your work, or will it be shared with other departments or with IT? What will be the storage media and the accepted formats? You will most likely not be able to accept all file formats. This slide shows a sample design and some of the equipment and tools you may need in setting up an electronic records preservation system. This approach follows the design and implementation steps of the National Archives of Australia, as well as the basic design followed by the New York State Archives Electronic Record Unit. This design includes a quarantine station, a normalization station, a storage station, and a disaster recovery station. The following slides will provide a sample configuration for each one of these stations. The intent here is to provide just one example of how each of these stations could be configured. In the first station, the quarantine station, is a single PC. Having a 19-inch monitor will aid in the reviewing of the received files, but is not critical that you have a monitor this large. If the PC was purchased in the last 3 to 4 years, it probably already came equipped with 2 or more USB connectors and at least a 150 gig hard drive. It should also have a CD/DVD recordable drive. And don't forget to have 2 to 3 USB flash drives to aid in the transferring of your files. The PC should have antivirus software, Microsoft Office, a web browser, and Adobe Acrobat installed, and have access to the Internet. This will aid in the updating of the antivirus software, which is important. The normalization station is a separate PC isolated from the quarantine station. This PC is also configured similar to the quarantine station, but has additional software installed. This additional software could include applications used to normalize received files to either XML, PDFA, or some other format. See the supplemental handout for additional software tools to aid in the normalization process. Having a checksum checker tool will also help ensure that the original bitstream files were not changed throughout the preservation process. These tools check the state of the files when received and compare it to the files at a later time. Again, see the handout for some tools to assist here. The storage station is a file server-based repository running either Windows Server, Unix, or Linux operating systems, whatever your IT department supports. This server should have at least 1 terabyte of storage space available and appropriate tape backup software and backup drive. Having a content management application installed on this server will help you organize and manage the files received. Consider open source software tools such as DSpace, Alfresco, and others, as well as commercial software if your budget can support these applications. The last piece is the disaster recovery station, which can be a server or just a single desktop PC that has the same backup tape drive and available storage space for you to load a complete copy of your repository onto it. Again, the configuration discussed here is just one example, and your configuration can vary at each station. Talk with your IT group and get their input on the best configuration for you. This slide shows a very similar setup, but using lower cost components. The quarantine station is very similar to the one on the previous slide, but has a smaller monitor to reduce costs. The normalization station again uses a smaller monitor, but could also have other open source PDF-A converters used, such as PDF Creator, instead of the more expensive Adobe Acrobat. The storage station could be a 1 terabyte external hard drive instead of a more expensive server-based system. You could leverage the native Windows directory structure to store your files instead of installing a content management application. You just need to be very careful with who has access to the files to ensure against accidental deletion of any of the files. Again, both the original bitstream or native files and the normalized files would be stored here. The disaster recovery station would be a standard PC using the same external hard drive used on the storage station. Either a tape backup unit or a third external drive could be used to transfer files from the storage station to the disaster recovery station. In the design phase, it is important to document your process. What are the acceptable file formats and applications you'll support? How much can you receive at any one point, considering your total volume and resources available? What media will be accepted during the file transfer process from the departments? Documenting the transfer process overall, including the sign-off process of the transfer, must be done. You have to verify the process to make sure everything that was intended to be transferred was indeed transferred, and what minimum metadata should be included. You must develop basic policies and procedures that are consistent and concise. You will need to define how and who can access files to ensure the proper balance between protecting files and access to those files is provided. In the implementation phase, this is where you further define the scope and objectives, including identifying the targeted department or functional area and the specific record series. You also need to identify the liaison or coordinator within the department. Although you may choose a specific department to start with, will this be the pilot project, or will you start with a subset within the department to focus your initial efforts on? Once you have started the pilot process, it is important to build in a review stage to reflect on the work you did and refine the process as needed before moving on to a larger area. You also need to be concerned with preparing for a disaster and defining specific steps to follow to minimize the effects of a disaster if one occurs. This is more than just backing up the data. What are the specific steps we take if a disaster occurs? As discussed earlier, you need a written and tested plan that is updated annually. Once the plan is in place, you will need to communicate the plan to all staff and train them on specific actions they may need to take in the event of a disaster. Remember, once you think you figured everything out, plan for change. Processes, people, and technologies will change over time, and you will have to adapt. There will always be other priorities that come up both within your area as well as the departments you work with, and the people's attention will be diverted. We have already discussed some of the ongoing activities you will have to pay attention to, especially awareness among users and senior administration. You will need to provide constant reinforcement of the issues and the importance of the program. The more that you can get senior officials to discuss your efforts at meetings, even a simple sentence can mean a lot in promoting your program. You will need to continuously review processes and refine them as needed, as well as educate all staff on these processes and the issues. Now is a good time to think about what you would do and the questions you would ask if posed with the following situation. You get a call from a particular department that says they have a number of files they would like to give you to preserve. Given this little information, what are some of the questions you need to ask the caller? Think about it. Review some of the information discussed in earlier parts of this webinar to help you formulate your questions. Having a list of basic questions at the ready for when you get calls like this will definitely help. This concludes Section 7. We encourage you to continue on to the last section of this webinar on preserving electronic records in colleges and universities, where we'll try to sum up some of the key points discussed in earlier sections.